Initially, none of the supervisors were even remotely paying attention, just giving me their required time. But when I told them that I had already received preliminary grants from both the federal government and Martin Bellman's charitable foundation that would offset more than half the cost, suddenly they perked right up and became very attentive. A meeting I was initially expecting to last for an hour ended up taking almost 3.5. I was feeling pretty damn good about myself the rest of the day, filled with excitement and anticipation of the very real possibility that I could be helping to bring a state-of-the-art public safety facility to Red River Falls in Mason County. I had so engrossed myself in work that I hadn't even noticed that it was nearly 1,700 hours. The only thing that snapped me out of my busy trance was my phone buzzing in its carrier. I picked up my phone and haphazardly glanced at the screen. My heart nearly stopped as I saw that it was the predetermined distress signal from the pager I had given Dean. It read 911. I immediately grabbed my desk phone and punched in the speed dial for our dispatch center. Liz Harrison, our lead dispatcher, answered the call. "Yes, Sheriff? What can I do for you?" "Liz, I need an immediate trace on a department pager signal." "Okay," she said, not breaking her tone. "Can you give me the radio number?" "Yes. The number is 9150. "Give me a minute," she said. I paced for a good minute before she came back on the line. "Sheriff, my computer is showing that emergency signal coming from the vicinity of Montgomery Avenue and 25th Street Southwest." My mind raced as I thought for a moment. Holy shit, that's near Dean's house. He must still be at home. "Thanks, Liz," I stammered. "Oh, and by the way, please do me a favor and page Captain Ben Villanueva, Lieutenant Chris Hayes, and have them meet me at the sheriff's office immediately. Oh, and Radio Lieutenant Angel Ryerson, and have all of Bravo shift gather here also. Will you?" "Absolutely, Sheriff. Need anything else?"
No.
"Liz, that should be it." 10-4, she said. Pages are going out as we speak. My mind was racing. So Dean was probably still at home. But what was going on? As soon as I asked myself the question, I knew I had the answer. Of course. We had the whole house wired for video and sound. I dashed to my computer and scrolled down in the browser to the link for the video surveillance system and punched in the passwords. It took literally only seconds to get it right today, thank God, as opposed to a couple of days ago. I selected the live stream option and waited while the video stream initialized for me to be able to view it. The video came up on my laptop with the screen divided into the different views the multiple cameras were giving me. Everyone was in the master bedroom, and I enlarged that view on computer. Dean was cornered by Mercedes, Brad, and 2 other men that I didn't immediately recognize. Dean was hysterical and was pleading with them all as though he were pleading for his life. "Please, Mercedes, I'm begging you, don't do this to me. We're done discussing this, Dean. We've already made a decision, remember? I never agreed to anything, Mercedes. Not like this. You and I agreed, Dean, that my happiness came first and foremost in our marriage. We agreed that you would do whatever it took to make me happy. This is what I want. This is what makes me happy. So, by default, this is what we want, even if you can't see that right now." Jesus, she was a mind-controlling, manipulative bitch. It was now obvious why the other 2 males were also in the residence. They were there to make sure Dean went through with this debacle whether he wanted to or not. Obviously, from the way he was crying and begging, Dean wanted no part of this. At least he had the sense to hit the panic button on his pager. Thank God he was smart enough to wear the pager. Mercedes looked at Brad and his 2 buddies. "Look, the sooner we get this over with, the better it is going to be for all of us. So, I'm going to go get my stuff ready, and you guys make sure Dean gets ready. What time do we need to be wherever it is we're going?" "Doc wants us there no later than 5:30. They gotta prep everything and make sure everyone else is out of there. Dino goes under the knife no later than 6:30, Brad informed everyone. "Okay, just get him ready," she said, giving Brad a kiss. "Sounds good, babe," he said. "All right, Dino, the doc wants you nice and clean, so you need to hit the shower first." Dean stood there, petrified. "Let's go, Dean. Come on. Get your bum in the shower." Dean stood there like the proverbial deer in the headlights. His only defense at this point was to try and stall. "Ah, Jesus Christ," he said, losing his patience. "Come on, you two. Give me a hand." Brad and one of the other two males forcibly grabbed Dean and immediately started ripping his clothes off while the third one started the shower in the master bath. As they were undoing Dean's belt and taking his pants off, Brad Weston noticed the pager on Dean's belt. The sight of a pager in this day and age was obviously a rare occurrence. "What the hell is this? A pager? You still carry a pager?" he chuckled. "It's not mine," Dean said through his sobs. "It belongs to the sheriff's department." "What the hell do you carry it for?" I do a lot of work for Sheriff Quinn." Brad started laughing out loud. "Sheriff Quinn? What a trip. Whatever, dude. Throw his bum in the shower." The three men finished stripping Dean and literally tossed him in the shower, where he proceeded to curl up on the floor in a fetal position. Brad and his two buddies stood just outside the bathroom door where they could keep an eye on Dean. "Hey, Brad," one of the two men said. "What's the deal with him and the sheriff? I mean, is it really a good idea to screw with him like this if he's really close to the sheriff?" "Oh God, Kyle. Don't be such a kitty. We got nothing to worry about with the sheriff. Trust me." "Now hold on a minute, Brad," the other stranger said. "Kyle's got a point." "Todd, you two? What the hell are you two kiddies worried about? Sheriff Quinn is one of the biggest douchebags in the entire state. I guarantee you he doesn't have a clue what is going on. How can you be so sure?" Kyle asked. "Because he is a dense scumsucker, that's why. Look, can you two keep a secret? I mean, I don't want Mercedes finding out because they used to be friends." "Jesus, Brad," Todd said. "Of course we can. Brothers don't narc out other brothers, right? Damn straight they don't. I'll kick both of your bums if you ever spill this, okay?" "Lips are sealed," Kyle said. "Okay, here goes," Brad started, pausing for effect. "I screwed Quinn's ex-old lady." "No way," Todd blurted. "I call bullshit," Kyle added. "No, I swear to God. I screwed her, like, 6 times. Her name was Clarissa, and she did shit for me she wouldn't even do for her husband, yo." "Are you serious?" "Man, Quinn would beat your bum if he found out," Todd said. My fists were clenched tightly, and I could feel the acid pour into my stomach as I heard Brad Weston brag about screwing my ex-wife. I didn't freak out right then and there because I didn't know instantly if he was just bullshitting his friends or not. But just the fact that he even said it made me want to slit his goddamn throat. "No, man. Quinn don't have a clue, dude. Because, do you want to know what the best part is? It's the fact that I was screwing her while she was cheating on him with somebody else. Isn't that screwed up? That crazy bitch was cheating with me on the guy she was cheating on her husband with. Get the hell out of here." Kyle laughed. "You rock, dude," Todd added, amazed. I stood there seething. Brad had just confirmed it. There was no other way that he could have known Clarissa had cheated on me unless he heard it from her himself. Even though Clarissa and I had been divorced for months, it still opened up a new wound that would take me a long time to get over. I might forgive her, but I would never forget. Just then my afternoon shift supervisor, Lieutenant Deputy Angel Ryerson, arrived in my office. "Hello, Pat. I got the word to meet you here," she said.
"But..."
"What?" "Oh, sorry," I said sheepishly. I was distracted. "Are the rest of the deputies here?" "Brian Kelly and Danny Larson are both here. Still waiting on the other two." "Did you tell Deputy Kinch to stay at his post in Royal Fork?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, have Kelly and Larson wait in the conference room. I'll wait until Deputy Roush and Deputy Lowe get here before I brief you all on what's going on, okay? Oh, and give Red River Falls PD a heads up that we might need them, too, okay? Geez, Sheriff, are we going to war or what?" "I don't know yet, but let's be prepared just in case." "Okay, I'll get him all together and call the PD." I returned my attention to my laptop and saw that the three men had returned their attention to Dean and were dragging him out of the shower and forcibly drying him off, teasing and taunting him mercilessly the whole way. "Don't feel too bad, Dino," Brad said. "Some guys just don't deserve to keep their balls." The other two men laughed. "How did you get this whole thing set up, Brad?" Todd wanted to know. "I used to work out with Dr. Mullen. After a while, he hired me as a personal trainer, and that's how I got started in my sideline job. Selling insurance doesn't really make a chick's panties wet, you know? So Doc Mullen sees me with a lot of the women I train with and asks if I can hook him up, too. So I did. Man, I've scored more kitty for that dude than he could shake a stick at. So I told him I'd need him to return the favor someday, and that's why he agreed to help me out with neutering old Dino here. Isn't the doc married too? Todd asked. Yeah, but he was desperate to get something on the side. He says his old lady is a frigid bitch who was just out to get her MRS degree in college. Pretty much forgot all about sex after they got married and had a couple of kids. Brad, Kyle, and Todd all forcibly dressed Dean in a sweatsuit, presumably because he would be getting undressed wherever this operation was supposed to take place. All right, let's sit tight. Mercedes should be back in a minute with my van, Brad said. So you really nailed the sheriff's wife, huh? That's awesome, dude. Kyle said admiringly. Yes, like 6 times. Was she hot? Todd asked. Oh yeah, I don't dig on fat and ugly chicks. That's why I score chicks at the gym. Clarissa wasn't the best piece I've had, but definitely not the worst. It was all I could do not to punch the screen of my own computer, as I had to listen to Brad talk about screwing my ex-wife. God is my witness, I swore to myself, I would have a piece of his bum somehow, somewhere, at some time. I would bring the man extreme pain. Who's the best piece you ever screwed? Kyle asked. The best piece? The best piece is the one I haven't had yet. If you think Clarissa Quinn was hot, you haven't seen Sheriff Quinn's fiancée. Her name is Shannon. I've only seen her a few times, but I have decided to make it my mission in life to get the shit out of that woman. She's the kind of chick you take one look at and think, where have you been my whole life? She is smoking hot. Huge, perfect jugs and the most spectacular bubble bum I've ever seen. Plus she's tall, like 5'9" or 5'10". Like I said, she is my next conquest after me and Mercedes are done. Buddy, you just signed your own death warrant. Sheriff? Angel said. Yeah? The whole duty shift is here. And Captain Villanueva just got here, too. She could see that I was obviously upset. Are you okay, Pat? You don't look too good. I am fine, Angel. I am fine. We just have to act fast. Run into the conference room and tell everyone to don riot gear. Helmets, tactical vests, shields, gloves, iPro, and batons. We don't have time to activate the SOG team. Okay, I'll tell them, she said and took off. Shit. By the time I looked back at the computer screen, it was obvious that everyone had left Dean's house. I speed-dialed dispatch again and asked for Liz Harrison. I could only pray that somehow Dean maintained his presence of mind and had managed to snag his pager and take it with him. Liz, I need you to track that radio signal. Is it moving, or is it still stuck at the house? One moment, Sheriff, she said. I could hear the click of computer keys in the background as she furiously tried to triangulate the radio signal from Dean's pager. It looks like the signal is still stationary, Pat. Damn it, I thought to myself. Oh, wait a second. The signal is definitely moving, Sheriff. Northbound towards downtown. Yes, Dean had done it. Thanks, Liz. I'll be in my vehicle and I'll need you to work this operation for me. Okay? 10-4, Sheriff. I ran out to the conference room and saw everyone, including Chris Hayes and Ben Villanueva, putting on their riot gear. There were 8 of us available, and I could only hope that it would be enough as we didn't have time to activate the Special Operations Group or SOG team. All right, everybody, listen up. I have every reason to believe that a man has been taken by force and is going to have an illegal medical procedure performed on him against his will. I'm trying to ascertain his exact whereabouts at this time. Dispatch is tracking an emergency signal from a pager the subject was given. We won't have an exact location, but it should get us close enough. Everybody head to your vehicles, and I'll relay more info as we get going, okay? The room cleared out as everyone headed to their respective cruisers. I checked my gear quickly. Even though I was sheriff, I still wore a full-duty uniform daily that included all of the same equipment as every one of my deputies. Ben Villanueva dressed the same, even though he was a captain. No suits and ties allowed in my department. I had my service pistol, which was a Glock 22 40 caliber pistol. One of my first acts as sheriff was to standardize the weaponry of the department. Under Bud Roberts and his predecessors, deputies were given an allotment of cash to purchase their own service revolvers or pistols. I had previously used everything from Berettas to Smith & Wesson. Standardizing the firearms eliminated the need to purchase various sizes and types of ammunition and made it much easier for our armorer to service the weapons. It also ensured that we maintained uniform proficiency on our weapons as a department. I double-checked the rest of my gear and then made sure all of my riot gear was in my Ford Expedition, which was my assigned vehicle as sheriff. I turned the ignition and brought the big 5.4-liter V8 to life and headed towards downtown Red River Falls. I looked in my rear-view mirrors and saw the rest of the deputies were following in a convoy. "Dispatch, 1701, I said as I keyed my hand mic. 1701, dispatch. Go ahead, Liz came back. Dispatch, I need an update on that signal, I said. Wait one, came the reply. Signal at this time is in the vicinity of the 1400 block of La Crescent, still appears to be moving north. Good copy. La Crescent Drive was the same boulevard that led to Holy Family Medical Center. Surely they wouldn't attempt to perform an illegal surgery there, would they? There had to be some other place that would be more discreet. I decided to call someone who might know. I hit the sync button on my dash and tapped the phone icon. Call Shannon's cell, I commanded to the computer. Within seconds, I could hear the phone ringing on the speaker. Hey babe, Shannon said. I could hear the smile and the love in her voice. For a split second, I almost forgot what I called her for. I wish I had time to pillow talk, sweetheart, but I need some information. They've got Dean and they're taking him somewhere. It looks like they're headed for Holy Family, but they wouldn't possibly do an illegal surgery there, would they? Oh my God. Oh my God. Are you serious? Serious as a heart attack, sweetheart. Do you have any idea where something like that might be done? Do you know if any medical personnel are involved? She asked. I only have one name. A doctor, Molly or something like that. Shit. I couldn't remember the name all of a sudden. I needed to calm the down. Do you mean Dr. Mullen? Shannon corrected me. Yes, that's the guy. Dr. Mullen is a general surgeon who works mostly out of the outpatient surgical center. But that place is only open during the day, and they don't do surgeries on Thursday afternoons. Only open during the day? And no surgeries on Thursday afternoon? That had to be the place. That's it, honey. That's gotta be it. It's supposed to be closed, which means there won't be anyone official to come snooping around. You did it, sweetheart. Oh, Patrick, I'm so scared for Dean. Will you promise to let me know how it goes? I'll call you as soon as I can. Sweetheart, I gotta go. We're almost there. Okay, good luck. I love you. I love you too, Shannon. I punched the icon to end the call. All units, proceed to Brimmeyer Electric's building and prepare to stage in the parking lot. Brimmeyer Electric was a store that sold all manner of tools and equipment to local contractors and independent electricians. They had a large parking lot, and their building would help keep us hidden from the view of the hospital. The outpatient surgical center was located a half-block northeast of the main hospital campus, but was still located within the overall campus area, which consumed nearly 6 blocks total. Once I had everyone gathered up, I gave them my plan. Okay, everybody. The outpatient surgical center is supposed to be closed and empty this time of day. It presents the perfect opportunity for this illegal operation to be done in a fairly safe manner. I believe a local physician, Dr. Mullen, is cooperating with the individuals who are perpetrating this crime. The victim is a fellow county employee, Dean Strobe. Holy shit, Deputy Brandon Roush exclaimed. Dr. Mullen is the guy who fixed my hernia last year. Really? Well, he's a criminal, I said, eliciting a chuckle from everyone. Ben, I need you to head over to Holy Family and see if you can meet up with Steve Nelson. He's the head of security for the hospital. See if you can gain access to video surveillance for us. I'm on it, Ben said as he headed for his cruiser. As for the rest of us, we're going to divide up into 2 teams. Half of you will be with Lieutenant Hayes, and the others will be with Lieutenant Ryerson. We waited in the parking lot for a few minutes when I got word from Ben Villanueva that 2 cars had pulled into the parking lot of the outpatient surgical center, a blue Toyota Corolla that belonged to Dean's wife and a red Nissan Pathfinder that was being driven by Brad Weston. All 5 subjects exited the vehicles and proceeded to the side entrance of the building. Todd and Kyle both had Dean in their grip and forced him into the building. My cell phone buzzed. This is Quinn. Pat, this is Ben. I'm here with Steve Nelson. I've got eyes on the outside of the surgical center, but there is a separate security office in the building itself that monitors the internal cameras. Can Steve send someone over there to get eyes on for us? Preferably without being seen by Mercedes and Brad? That's the problem, Pat. Steve told me that he thinks one of his security guys might already be inside the building. At least his car is in the north lot. His name is Colby Smothers and, by Steve's schedule, he's not supposed to be working today. I think we have to assume that he is an accomplice. Shit. And if we try and approach the building, they'll see us. Sure as hell. Ben, ask Steve if there is any way possible that we can get into the building without being seen by external security cameras. Okay, hold on a sec. I waited about a minute while I could faintly overhear them talking. Sure, Pat, here's an idea. Steve says there is a narrow steam and utility tunnel that leads from the main hospital to the clinics and the surgical center. He says the tunnel entrance in the surgical center leads directly to the maintenance room that is actually located adjacent to the security office. If we do it quickly enough, we can get in there and occupy the security office before Colby can alert the others. Okay, good job, Ben. I'm gonna head over there, and I'll meet Steve in the office. You and I will go with him and make entry to the surgical center. I'll have both teams standing by and ready to make entry once we have positive control. Okay, see you in a minute, Pat, he said as he hung up. Okay, folks, I said, addressing the deputies. I'm going to have you all proceed on foot over to the main hospital security office. Angel and Chris, divide up your teams how you want them. Once I'm inside the surgical center, I'll designate your avenues of approach. In the meantime, contact dispatch and have all available Red River Falls police units establish a perimeter around the area. Just tell them we have a situation in progress, and we'll advise them when we can. And have dispatch send an ambulance from the fire department as well, in case we need them. I proceeded across the street and jogged to the hospital's main entrance and rushed towards the security office, which was located near the emergency department. I met Ben and Steve Nelson, and we proceeded to the physical plant and entered the steam tunnel. The tunnel was barely wide enough for one person. Running along the left side of the tunnel were high-pressure steam pipes and all manner of electrical conduit containing electrical wires and computer and communication lines. It would be a bad place to get caught in a fire or flood, that's for sure. It took us about 4 minutes to move from the physical plant and enter underneath the surgical center. There was a ladder that led from the steam tunnel to the utility room above. It was only about 1 story in height. Okay, Pat and Ben, Steve said. As you go up the ladder, you'll enter into the utility room, which is where the HVAC system and main utility panels are located. You'll see the main door. Exit and go left and proceed about 10 feet. The security office will literally be the first door on the left-hand side. Hopefully, Colby hasn't barricaded himself in there. Thanks so much for the help, Steve, I said as I began my climb. We'll call you up as soon as everything is clear. I got to the top of the ladder, followed shortly by Ben. We approached the door to the utility room and both drew our sidearms. I proceeded to slowly open the door and peek out into the hallway. I saw nothing, but I could hear a single voice coming from the direction of the security office to my left. I entered the hallway, turned left and hugged the wall as Ben slowly and carefully closed the door to the utility room without making a sound. I gave a signal, and we proceeded with guns drawn to the security office. Sure enough, there was Colby Smothers sitting in a chair with his back turned to us and talking loudly on his cell phone. I quickly whisked him around in his chair to face me and immediately grabbed the phone out of his hand and ended his call with my thumb, while keeping the barrel of my .40 cal Glock pointed directly at his nose. Don't even think about making a sound, understand? Colby just nodded his head with a shocked and pale expression on his face, probably wondering how in the hell we had gotten into the building without him knowing. Ben, go and get Steven Nelson and bring him up. Colby, I know you're not supposed to be working today, which means only one thing. You're helping out with an extremely illegal activity. I need you to tell me how many people are here and what room they are all in, okay? Colby just nodded his head. There's 5 people that just came in about 15 minutes ago. How many surgical people are here? 6, I think. I need you to be sure, Colby. There's 6. Definitely 6. The doc, the anesthetist, a nurse, and 3 surgical techs. Where? Surgical Suite 5, he said, trembling. Steve and Ben entered the office. "Jesus, Colby," Steve said, pissed. "Do you have any idea what in the hell you got yourself involved with? Dr. Mullen asked me to be here today. He said he'd pay me triple overtime to help out with an emergency case. He said all I had to do was just keep the building secure while they were doing the operation." He was nearly hyperventilating. "And nothing tripped any warning bells that his might not be legit? It didn't strike you odd that a doctor was going to pay you directly instead of the hospital?" Colby just looked away in panic and shame. "Let's worry about that later, Steve. Colby, show me where everyone is at and what they're doing." Colby showed me the various camera screens. In the largest screen, there were 5 people in the surgical room making all necessary preparations. In another room, I could see Brad, Mercedes, Todd, and Kyle all forcing Dean out of his clothes and into a surgical gown. His clothes were in a pile on the floor, and it didn't appear anyone had found his pager yet. "Hayes from Quinn," I said into my radio mic. "Quinn, Hayes." "Go ahead," he replied. "Chris, go ahead and proceed with both teams to the main entrance of the building. Someone will be there to let you in." "Good copy. Moving." I returned my attention to the video screens. It appeared that Dr. Mullen had entered the room where Dean and the others were. "There," I said, pointing at the screen. "Focus in on that camera and bring up the audio so I can hear." Steve Nelson sat down at the chair while Ben Villanueva proceeded to cuff Colby. The individual camera feeds were all assembled on one large flat-screen TV on the left side of the console. The security officer could bring up any camera he wanted to onto a large flat screen on the right side of the console to get a better view. Steve Nelson also brought up the audio as Dr. Mullen spoke to Mercedes and Brad. "Just to head off any last-minute jitters, you two, I'm going to ask you both one last time. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" Dr. Mullen asked. "Absolutely," Mercedes said as Brad nodded. "This has been a fantasy of ours for a long time. I can't thank you enough, Dr. Mullen, for helping our dream come true. This is so exciting. I can tell you both are stoked about this. I want to reiterate that I have written extensive documentation that makes this whole situation look like a necessary operation for testicular cancer. If anyone from the hospital looks, they will see what looks like months' worth of painstaking documentation and medical dictation that necessitates the procedure. We appreciate everything," Mercedes assured him. "We all know exactly what to say and what to do from here on out. And Dean loves me so much and thinks I love him so much in return that I can promise you'll have his full cooperation too. Besides, he won't want to risk the humiliation of people outright knowing that he has been castrated." "A real man wouldn't either," the doctor agreed. "Maybe there is some tiny shred of manhood left in Dean after all." "There better not be," Mercedes warned. "This operation better make him the dominated, subservient cuck that we want him to be. He damned well better know his place in the world after this is all over with. I think I may have an idea of how you can completely and totally accomplish the absolute domination over Dean that you truly desire," Dr. Mullen suggested. "How's that?" Brad asked. "What if I were to tell you I could make it so that Dean would feel every last sensation of the procedure as he was going through it? What would you think if I told you that he would literally feel the excruciating sensation of every slice of the scalpel and the unimaginable pain of having his testicles removed, but that he would be powerless to do anything about it?" "Jesus," Brad said, sounding genuinely spooked. "I don't know about that. I mean, there was a reason why we wanted this done professional-like, you know?" Mercedes wasn't fazed in the least bit. "Tell me more," she ordered. "Well, anesthesia is a combination of several things, really," Dr. Mullen explained. "One drug causes the patient to fall asleep. Another drug paralyzes the body, and additional drugs relieve pain and cause amnesia. I could order my anesthetist to give only the drugs that would cause him to fall asleep and paralyze him. He would essentially be asleep, but he would also have full sense of touch throughout his body and feel the procedure. He wouldn't really remember for sure what happened to him while he was under, but I guarantee you he will be completely traumatized from the experience. He'll be so scared and in pain that he will literally come crying to you for support. You'll have Dean eating out of your hand the rest of your life. He will do whatever he needs to in order to feel safe, which means he will do whatever you want him to for the rest of your life." "Jesus Christ," I whispered as I listened to their psychotic plot to torture Dean. Do I understand this correctly, Sheriff? Steve asked. These people are planning an illegal surgical procedure to castrate her husband? That's exactly what's happening, Steve. Oh, sweet Mary, Mother of God. He looked behind him where Colby Smothers was cuffed and cowering in the corner. Colby, you are so fired for this. My radio crackled. Sheriff, this is Hayes. We're at the front entrance. Copy, I replied. Ben, can you let those guys in? Got it, he said. He returned shortly with all of the deputies and 2 firefighter paramedics from the Red River Falls Fire Department that I had requested in case they were needed. Steve and I listened to the audio from the video screen as Mercedes confirmed for Dr. Mullen that she was only too happy to allow him to enhance the procedure for Dean and make it that much more memorable for everyone. I've seen a lot in over 15 years of law enforcement, but until today, I had never really seen evil face to face. Mercedes Strobe, as gorgeous and striking as she was physically, was also the embodiment of the devil himself. Who knew something so beautiful could be so cruel? Chris Hayes, Angel Ryerson, and the rest of the deputies had congregated in the small security space. It was obvious from watching everyone on the screen that they believed Colby had the building secure. We waited for about 15 more minutes as the surgical team continued preparing the room. Soon, Dean arrived in the surgical room wearing only a pair of white underwear briefs and being escorted by Brad, Mercedes, Todd, and Kyle, who were all wearing complete surgical scrubs. They forced Dean to lie down on the surgical table, and his arms were strapped down by heavy Velcro straps, which Dr. Mullins said were to prevent Dean from thrashing about if the anesthesia were to suddenly wear off for some reason. In short, he explained, strapping him down to the table to protect Dean during the procedure. He said this while giving a knowing smirk to Mercedes and Brad. The anesthetist placed a mask over Dean's face, and she started counting backwards from 10. By the time she got to 5, it was apparent that Dean was already asleep. Okay, everyone. Medics, you 2 stay here for now. Chris, you take your team down the left side of the hallway, and Angel, you take your team down the right side. Ben, you have command of the assault. Get back there and form 2 stacks on either side of the door to surgical room 5. Stand by for my order to breach and then execute once I give it. The 2 teams of deputies quickly moved down the hallway and through the double doors that led from the office and business areas of the surgical center and towards the operating rooms themselves. I returned my attention to the main screen. All right, everyone, let's proceed, Dr. Mullen ordered. Wait a minute, the anesthetist shouted. I haven't finished administering all of my meds yet. I still have to give him the Versed and Rocuronium and hang the Propofol drip. I still have to titrate him to the Propofol to make sure he tolerates it. Don't worry about all of that. But doctor, if I don't, the patient will feel everything you're doing to him. That's none of your business, Florence. He's had medical gas and succinylcholine. Years ago, ether was all they gave for anesthesia. The patient will be just fine. Doctor, my God, you can't make me do this. Damn it, Florence. You will do what I tell you to do. Now get ready, everyone. We're starting the procedure. Nurse Kimmel finished shaving him and bathed and sterilized the surgical site with povidone. The surgical nurse stood there, looking back and forth between Dr. Mullen and the anesthetist. Angie, Dr. Mullen snapped. Did you hear what I said? She jumped and said, yes, doctor. She took a large forceps and grabbed a large wad of gauze sponges and dipped them into a bowl of povidone, which was similar to iodine, and began swabbing Dean's now exposed genitals in preparation for the surgery. This was as far as I was willing to let it go. Just as Dr. Mullen reached to his right and grabbed a large scalpel, I punched the button on my lapel microphone and shouted, all personnel, go for breach. Now, now, now. Blessedly, the door to the surgical room was never locked. Chris, Angel, and their 2 teams immediately burst in with guns drawn and flooded the surgical room with Chris's team securing the left sector and Angel's team securing the right. Mason County Sheriff's Department. Get down on the floor now with your hands where I can see them. Get down on the floor now. All of the females in the room started screaming. Florence, the nurse anesthetist, just screamed, no. Oh my God. No. She just continued to stand there freaking out and was too petrified to get down on the floor like she was told. What the hell is the meaning of this? Dr. Mullen demanded. You are interrupting an urgent and delicate procedure. I demand you leave immediately. Florence continued to scream and freak out. My patient. He's unconscious and can't breathe on his own. I have to help him. Ben Villeneuve keyed his mic and shouted, Pat, we need medics up front. Now. I turned to the two RRFFD medics and shouted, Go. Now. The two medics, one male and one female, both sprinted down the hallway towards the surgical suites. They had seen the path taken by the assault team and headed the same way. Medics on the way, Ben. Copy. The medics are on the way, ma'am. Step back from the patient. Ben ordered. But he's not breathing, she pleaded. Ben hesitated for a moment. Okay, he said. Do what you need to help him. Keep your hands where I can see them. Danny, give her a hand. Deputy Sergeant Danny Larson holstered his weapon and proceeded to see what he could do to help the nurse anesthetist. Just then, both paramedics arrived in the room. The extra commotion, combined with Danny moving in to help, provided just enough of a distraction. Brad Weston leaped to his feet and sprinted through a door to an adjoining surgical room, then through another door and into the hallway. Brad took off running with Ben in full pursuit. We got one running, Pat. Two other deputies drew down hard on Todd and Kyle to make sure they stayed on the floor. Shit. I watched Brad turn to his right down another hallway and into a room that was the doctor's lounge. The door locked from the inside, and Ben couldn't gain access to it. I watched as Brad bolted to another door that was kitty-corner to the one he just entered through, and I moaned as I realized it was a door that exited the building. He's outside, Ben. I'm pursuing on foot, I said into my mic. I dashed out the front door of the building and immediately cut to the right and around the corner of the building. I could see Brad about 80 yards ahead of me as he was sprinting across the parking lot. He was headed towards a residential area on the north side of the hospital. I made good time crossing the parking lot and kept pace with Brad, even though I wasn't really closing it. I reminded myself that all I had to do was follow Brad. Brad was the one who had to decide where he was going. Eventually, he would hesitate at the wrong time, and I would eventually catch him. Lucky for me, he wasn't even looking back to see who was following him. Brad was still in a full sprint heading down Adams Avenue. He ran straight for about 3 blocks before cutting left onto 4th Street Northwest. He was getting deeper and deeper into an older and established neighborhood. The homes here were fairly old, stately and close together. Brad ran for a block and a half before cutting north again through an alley between Jefferson and Madison Avenues. Brad stopped running, obviously thinking he had outrun any pursuit. He was walking with his hands on his hips, trying to catch his breath. As I rounded the corner and headed towards him, he was only about 20 yards in front of me. The sound of my equipment on my utility belt gave me away. Brad immediately whisked around, saw me and yelled, "Ah, God." He headed in a dead sprint again and crossed 5th Street, still staying in the alley. We ran steady, with me gaining on him slightly. We crossed 6th Street and then 7th Street. Halfway between 7th and 8th Street, Brad cut left into what he probably thought was another alley between Jefferson and Madison. He was wrong. It was a utility right-of-way only, and the path was bordered almost exclusively by 6-foot privacy fences. The path dead-ended to another privacy fence wall from a house on Madison Avenue. The fence was made from PVC. When Brad tried to scale it, he couldn't get any traction with his feet due to the shoe coverings he was still wearing from the surgical center. He made one attempt and clumsily fell to the ground at the base of the wall. When he got back up for another attempt, he looked behind him and found himself staring down the barrel of my Glock. Smartly, he slowly rose with both hands in the air, completely out of breath. "Brad Weston," I panted, trying to catch my own wind. "You're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. If you give up the right to remain silent, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Do you understand these rights as I have read them to you?" Brad just stood there, gasping for air and nodding his head yes. For some reason, I just stood there, pointing my weapon at Brad. For a few fleeting moments, a powerful wave of emotion washed over me, and I was only moments away from shooting him. Brad could obviously sense it too, Perhaps he saw my eyes narrow or some other telltale sign that I really wanted to put a double tap in his forehead. "Look, Sheriff," he said, hesitantly. "You got me, okay? I'm not running, okay? I'm not resisting. You have no reason to use deadly force, okay? You were going to mutilate my friend today," I said tersely. Brad swallowed hard. "Look, this whole thing was Mercedes' idea, okay? All of it, Sheriff. I mean, I know I helped some, too. But this whole thing was her crazy idea, okay?" Now my eyes narrowed and I sighted in my big Glock on Brad's forehead, bringing my right index finger to rest in the trigger well and thumbed off the safety. Now Brad really panicked. "Oh my God, Sheriff. It wasn't my idea. Okay, Dean Strobe is just a chicken, cuck husband. He isn't worth killing me over, okay? I admit, we were gonna cut his nuts off. But that isn't the same as killing a guy, okay? I'll tell you what you want to know, for Christ's sake. Sheriff, are you listening to me?" I stared Brad down for about another 20 seconds, just about to the point where I thought I saw tears forming in his eyes. I brought my Glock down from a shooter's stance, flipped the safety back on, and returned the weapon to my holster. Brad let out a sigh of desperation and leaned back against the privacy fence in relief. "I knew you'd see reason, Sheriff," he said, smirking. "The little cuck isn't worth killing anybody over." In a flash, I drew out my X-26 taser with my left hand and drew down on Brad. A look of horror flashed over his face the instant I pulled the trigger and fired the 2 metal barbs directly into Brad's gut, just above his navel. "Ah," he screamed. "Damn, I never knew that a human male could make a noise like that." The X-26 delivered a 5-second burst of 50,000 volts into Brad's gut, completely disrupting every neuromuscular pathway in his body and reducing him to a steaming pile of dog shit. "That first burst, Brad, was for Dean Strobe," I said, tauntingly. Brad just lay there moaning. "This next burst, however, is for screwing my ex-wife." I pulled the trigger again and delivered another 5-second burst of electricity, eliciting the same ear-piercing and blood-curdling man shriek as the first one. "Stop resisting," I shouted, while chuckling. "Stop resisting." I couldn't help myself. Once my inner demon gets let off the chain, it is hard to get him back on the leash. "Oh," Brad moaned. There were 2 little blood spots forming on his abdomen from where the barbs entered. "Sheriff, you didn't have to do that, a-hole." "Oh, yes, I did, Brad," I said, closing in on him. "That was to send a message that there is a price to be paid for screwing with my friends and family. It was also a message that you had better stay away from my fiancée, Shannon. Do you hear me, you son of a bitch?" I grabbed him by hair and looked him right in the eyes. "If you go anywhere near Shannon, I will make it my mission in life to bury you. Understand? My mission in life. I will bury you with a shovel and then bury the shovel." Brad gulped and nodded. I rolled him on his side, being careful of the taser barbs still stuck in his abdomen. I cuffed his hands behind his back and stood him up. As I did so, I got an overwhelming smell of bowel and the front of his scrub pants was wet. Brad had shit and pissed himself during the second blast of the taser. "Oh God, Brad, you absolutely reek." He was still pretty wobbly once he was on his feet again, and a large piece of turd dropped out the bottom of his pant leg and onto the ground. I narrowly avoided stepping in it. As a further act of humiliation, I slipped my right hand underneath Brad's left arm and placed it on the back of his neck, pushing him over into a hunched position and proceeded to duck walk him the entire 9 blocks back to the surgical center. No way was I going to call for a cruiser to pick him up, just to get Brad's shit and piss all over the inside of one of my vehicles. It took 15 minutes to get back to the surgical center. People had come out of their homes, slowed down in their cars, or stopped walking long enough to watch me march Brad back to where we started. Needless to say, he was pretty pissed and humiliated. "Holy shit. There you are, Pat," Ben said, greeting me. He immediately made a face as he caught a whiff of Brad's new scent. "How's Dean?" "He's doing okay. The paramedics are still with him, and we're able to bring him out of the anesthesia okay. He seems like he's going to be fine. Scared and shaken, of course, but physically okay." "Good. When they're done with Dean, have one of the paramedics meet up with me to get my taser barbs removed from Brad's stomach." "Okay, will do." Where is everybody else? We've got them in custody and holed up in one of the waiting rooms. The county attorney and one of his prosecutors are on their way over right now. The surgical room is secure and the State Bureau of Criminal Investigation is on their way here right now to begin processing the entire building. Excellent. Ben, good work. Let's get Brad lumped in with the others. I got a feeling they're going to enjoy his company. Looks like you had a live one there, Pat. Ben chuckled. Bullshit. Dean protested. I never resisted. And you didn't have to taste me, a hole. That's what happens when you resist arrest, Brad. Don't worry, though. That's a fairly minor charge, and I'm pretty sure the county attorney will drop it once he gets done convicting you of all the other charges you face. But then again, maybe he will add it on there just for a little sugar on top. Ben led us to the waiting room where Mercedes, Todd, Kyle, Dr. Mullen, the anesthetist, and the rest of the surgical team were all waiting. I led Brad into the room and let him crumple into a ball on the floor at Mercedes' feet. At the same time, the rest of the room got a nose full of Brad's aroma and were all visibly uncomfortable. One of the surgical technicians started gagging and asked for a trash can where she promptly ridded herself of her day's lunch. Oh my God, one said. That's awful, said another. Oh my God, you smell like shit. That's because he defecated in his pants, I explained. That's because you tossed me 1,000,000 times. Brad protested. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to step out for a minute to converse and hobnob a little bit with my fellow deputies and the county attorney. All of them looked horrified at being forced to stay in the room with an incredibly offensive Brad Weston. But there was little they could do about it, as they were all handcuffed and had their ankles cuffed as well. Outside, I was met by Marion Lawson just as he arrived with Jillian Hackensack, one of his prosecutors. You want to tell me what the hell went down here, Pat? Marion asked. I gave Marion the Cliff Notes version of the events. He was incredulous through the initial explanation until I got to the point where I reminded him that we had hours of video and audio collected from Dean's own house, plus the audio and video collected from the surgical center itself. Marion shook his head as he listened to what he knew would be a major case of assault and kidnapping, but also he knew that the charges wouldn't stop there. It was a monumental case, and one that was almost certainly going to produce national headlines across the country when word of the enormity of the case finally got out. How in the hell is it that you seem to be such a shit magnet, Quinn? I guess I just have a magnetic personality, Marion. By the way, I'm still available anytime to take Peggy Jean up on her dinner invite. You'll be waiting a long time for that, Quinn. I'm Irish, you know. Does Peggy Jean make a decent corned beef? Peggy Jean makes a lot of things decent, but she doesn't make them for you. Can we get back to the case now? God, I loved needling him. Marion Lawson's wife gave me an invite to dinner quite some time ago, and I enjoy pissing off Marion by reminding him about it, especially because Marion is a total pig to his love-starved wife. The case is pretty well set, Marion. About all you and your staff have to do is watch and listen to the recordings and interview the suspects. Shouldn't be too difficult to get one or two of them to roll on the others. Do you know for a fact that everyone in there is even involved, Pat? I know for sure that Mercedes Strobe, Brad Weston, Todd Andrews, Kyle Weber, and Dr. Chet Mullen are all involved. What we heard on the audio and video feed would suggest that the nurse anesthetist is either involved or perhaps coerced into it. Possibly even the surgical nurse. Looks like the surgical room technicians were brought in just for the help. Okay. Have you told any of them what they're being charged with yet? Not really. When I arrested Brad Weston, I told him that he would be charged for sure with assault and kidnapping. That's as far as I got. Okay, I'll know more about what they're going to be facing after I have a chance to look at everything. Bring everything by my office first thing tomorrow. I assume you'll be here for a while yet? Yes. The guys from BCI will be here in about 45 minutes. The place is on lockdown for now, and Dean Strobe's house is officially a crime scene now, as well. Okay, fine. You handle it from here, Quinn. I'll see you first thing in the morning. Marion and his attaché left, and I decided to pay a little visit to the people in the waiting room. I was for sure going to boot the 3 surgical techs and probably the surgical nurse. I retrieved a surgical mask and spread a dab of Vicks VapoRub across my upper lip before I went into the waiting room. Hello again, everybody. I did my best to sound pleasant and chipper, despite the fact that the surgical mask hid most of my face. I pulled up a chair, turned it around and sat down in it backwards and leaned against the backrest as I looked at everyone. Okay, you and you, I said, pointing to the 3 surgical techs, are all free to go right now. Seriously, you're all free to leave. You're not being charged with anything. The 3 techs looked at each other and a wave of relief cascaded over their faces. Come on over here and I'll unlock your cuffs. The 3 techs eagerly waddled over to me and I unlocked their handcuffs and ankle cuffs, and they all made a very hasty exit from the waiting room. Part of it was probably from the relief of facing arrest, but most of it was probably to get away from the smell of Brad Weston's shit. Angie Kimmel? Yes, that's me, the surgical nurse said. How did you get assigned to this surgery today? Dr. Mullen called me at 3 o'clock this afternoon and told me he had an emergency procedure. I'm the surgical nurse on call today. That's all I know, Sheriff. I swear. Okay, that's all I needed to hear. Come on over here and I'll uncuff you too. Once she was gone, I sat there and stared at Dr. Mullen, Mercedes, Brad, Todd, Kyle, and Florence Jackson, the nurse anesthetist. One by one, I pointed at each of them and said, "You're going to jail. You're going to jail. You're going to jail. You're going to jail. You're going to jail, and you, Dr. Mullen, are definitely going to jail. I'm not going anywhere until I've spoken to my attorney, Sheriff Quinn. I'm going to personally frame your badge on my office wall when I'm done with you. Do you hear me? All you've done today is put a man's health in jeopardy. I've got plenty of medical documentation attesting to Mr. Strobe's medical condition." "Yeah, I know. I heard you talking about that on the security camera when you were chatting with Mercedes and Brad. That seemed to get the good doctor's attention. I want to see my husband," Mercedes demanded. "Absolutely not," I replied. "You can't keep me from away from my husband. Actually, under state law, I absolutely do have the right to initiate an order of protection for your husband if I feel there is an immediate threat to his health and safety. I'm not a threat to my husband. I want to see him now." "Mercedes, you and your accomplices just tried to initiate a surgery to castrate your husband against his will. I call that a huge threat to his health and safety. You don't know anything, Sheriff. You don't know anything about Dean and me. You think this was all a setup? You think this was some big crime, but it wasn't. You don't understand that this is what Dean wanted. He wanted to do something to make me happy. He was doing this for us. And besides, I don't want to go to jail. I can't go to jail." "Well, if it makes you feel better, Mercedes, you probably won't go to jail as long as the others. Women, on average, tend to get more leniency in sentencing than men do. It's kind of a trade-off for getting screwed on that whole equal work for equal pay thing. Sheriff, I demand to see my husband now. He'll explain everything." "Mercedes, shut the hell up," Dr. Mullen barked. "All of you, keep your damned mouths shut. My lawyer will handle everything when he gets here. Just shut up for now." "Dr. Mullen is right," Brad added. "Just remember what we talked about before, okay? But I want to see my husband. I demand to see my husband." "Mercedes, shut up." "You shut up, Mr. Poopy Pants. Sheriff, I want to see my husband now. I already told you that's not going to happen right now. And I already told all of you to shut your damned mouths. My lawyer will handle this for all of us. Now just shut the hell up," the doctor interjected. I looked over at the nurse anesthetist, Florence Jackson. "Miss Jackson, you look like you want to say something." She looked at me with a pained expression on her face and ever so slightly shook her head. "Shut up, Florence," Mullen warned. "Like I said, I've got this handled. My lawyer will be representing all of us. Nothing that is said in Quinn's presence can be used against us. Now will all of you just shut your damned mouths? Please." I got up and sat down next to Florence. "Miss Jackson, if you have something to say, I highly suggest you say it. Otherwise, you're going to get lumped in with everyone else, and that will mean conspiracy charges added to the rest of the laundry list of charges you will all be facing." Florence burst into tears. "Listen to me, Florence," Mullen warned. "I already told you I've got this handled. Just keep your damned mouth shut." "Miss Jackson," I said, as soothing as I could. "You are free to talk to me if you want to. The sooner you talk to me, the better. It is always going to be better for you to cooperate with me than work against me, okay? I didn't want to do it, I swear." Florence burst into frantic tears. Dr. Mullen forced me to. Sheriff, I botched a surgery 18 months ago. I used an expired bottle of propofol by accident. It was ineffective and my patient had an adverse reaction to it and went into cardiac arrest. She died on the operating table. You stupid bitch. I told you to keep your mouth shut. It's okay, Florence, I encouraged. How did he cover for you? I don't know. He has something on one of the pathologists and got him to officially list the cause of death as a heart attack that occurred during surgery. Dr. Mullen has been holding it over my head ever since. He forced me to help him today, or he said he would expose me and get my license revoked. I've got a son and daughter in high school, and I'm raising my own grandchild too. I can't go to jail. Sheriff, please. It's okay. Come on, let's get out of here, I said, helping Florence to her feet and helping her hobble out of the waiting room. I'm going to get you for this, you stupid bitch, Dr. Mullen screamed. If it is the last thing I ever do, if I go down, I'm taking you with me, you stupid, worthless, 304. Sheriff, I want to see my husband. I let the door close behind Florence and I as I uncuffed her and handed her off to Ben Villanueva to have a sworn statement taken. All hell broke loose in the waiting room as Dr. Mullen, Mercedes, Brad, Todd, and Kyle all began yelling and accusing one another. Yep, it was the very definition of the criminal domino effect in action. In an odd sort of way, it was music to my ears. I felt bad for Dean Strobe. As was expected, word got out of the entire situation and it became newspaper, television, and tabloid fodder all over the country. It even made its way into some of the jokes for the late-night shows. Also, you can probably imagine some of the headlines. Battle for the family jewels in Red River Falls. Woman goes nuts for her husbands. One man's junk was another woman's treasure. And the list goes on and on, one bad joke after another. If Mercedes Strobe had her way, she would have fought it all the way to trial. Dr. Mullen's own attorney had one interview with Mercedes and promptly pronounced her as nuttier than a squirrel turd. His exact words. He even wrote it down so people wouldn't forget. Fortunately for her, Mercedes ended up with a halfway decent public defender who eventually convinced her to plead out. Mercedes pled guilty to one count of aggravated assault with intent to commit serious bodily harm. She also pled guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated assault with intent. Her charges of kidnapping were downgraded to unlawful restraint, which was as big of a gift to a defendant as I had ever seen Marion Lawson give anyone. At the end of it all, Mercedes was sentenced to 15 to 20 years in prison, which meant that she would be spending a bare minimum of 7 years behind bars. At Dean's request, Mercedes' parental rights were terminated. Brad Weston went to bat and went down swinging. He was convicted of kidnapping, unlawful restraint, for securing Dean to the operating table against his will, aggravated assault with intent to commit serious bodily harm, and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault. Brad Weston was sentenced to 25 years in prison. With his good looks, there was no doubt in my mind that he would become prison's perennial homecoming queen. Todd Andrews and Kyle Weber both rolled over on Brad and Mercedes in a heartbeat. They were initially facing the same charges as Brad and Mercedes, but had them downgraded in exchange for a plea bargain. They both pled guilty to unlawful restraint and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault with intent. Both men were sentenced to 7 to 10 years in prison. As an added incentive, the judge allowed them to be sent to the same prison and even arranged for them to share a cell. Cute, huh? Florence Jackson gave sworn testimony on behalf of the prosecution. Her involvement launched a massive investigation that resulted in some very unflattering press for Holy Family Medical Center and led to the resignation and loss of medical license for the chief of pathology, Dr. Seth Dickinson. It was a wonder that he didn't face any criminal charges. Marion Lawson can take the blame for that. He failed to properly acquire the necessary medical records that would have surely led to a conviction for Dr. Dickinson, and the records were inadmissible. Usually I'm the only one who can piss off Marion like that, but it was his own fault. Florence Jackson's license as a certified registered nurse anesthetist was placed on probation for 2 years, during which time she would have to undergo a considerable number of hours of refresher training to ensure that such a mistake didn't happen again. Many of her colleagues were outraged that she was even able to keep her license. She quietly resigned from Holy Family Medical Center and took a position as a roving anesthetist serving numerous community hospitals in rural northern Minnesota near the Iron Range. Dr. Chet Mullen climbed to the top of the mast and rowed the ship all the way to the bottom of the ocean. He had no intentions of making a plea deal despite his lawyer all but begging him to. Mullen was found guilty on all counts of aggravated assault with intent to commit serious bodily harm, conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, and unlawful restraint. As an added bonus, since the illegal operation on Dean Strobe involved his genitalia, Mullen was also charged with and found guilty of felony sexual battery and indecent assault, which ensured that he would spend the rest of his life on the sex offender registry list. It was just a little salt to throw in the wound. Needless to say, Dr. Mullen would never be allowed to practice medicine again. Dean Strobe stayed on in his position for about another 3 months, just long enough for Mercedes to get sentenced. I knew in my heart that Dean wouldn't stay in the area. How could he? It was wrong. But he would always carry the stigma of what his wife tried to do to him. People and places, the names and the faces, they would always remind him of the life he used to know and trigger him daily. And so Dean made the tough decision to pack up his kids and head west for new opportunities. As a condition of Mercedes' plea deal, Dean had been granted an uncontested divorce. He sold or gave away nearly all of his worldly possessions, keeping only the pictures and mementos that were special to the kids. He wanted nothing to remind him of his life with Mercedes, or Brad, for that matter. I went and saw Dean the day they were getting ready to leave. Dean had his Subaru Outback all packed and ready to go, needing only a small towable U-Haul trailer to take his household goods with him. "Looks like you're all packed and ready to go," I said as I walked up to the front yard. "Pat, my gosh, what a surprise." Dean and I shook firmly. It was amazing to see the change in his demeanor and personality. He was definitely more outgoing, personable, and confident. Although the emotional scars were there if you looked deep enough. I just wanted to come out personally and say goodbye, and to thank you for all your hard work for us, Dean. I'm the one who should be thanking you, Pat. I wouldn't be doing this right now if it wasn't for you. And I mean that in a good way. I know you do, Dean. I'm just glad that everything turned out for the best. Me too. How are the kids doing, Dean? They're doing as well as they can be, Pat. I mean, I can only imagine how they're feeling. They're adjusting day by day. Their mother traumatized them, too. I think they feel more anger towards her and not just missing having her around. Even when she was here, she was so focused on Brad and what he wanted than she was on the kids or me. I understand. Have you thought about getting them any counseling? Oh, absolutely. That was priority number one. We've already had a chance to meet her, and she seems awesome. Both Brandon and Bryn really took to her from the get-go. I see good things happening there, and look forward to them getting back to some semblance of their old selves. That sounds great. Gosh, I don't even know where you guys are moving to. We're moving to Boulder, Colorado. Wow, I bet the scenery is amazing. It is, Pat. We're going to start off renting a 3-bedroom condo. Our front deck faces the west, and we have an absolutely amazing view of the Rockies. I'm jealous already. What are you going to be doing out there? Dean chuckled. Well, Pat, you wouldn't believe me. Try me. I dared. I'm going to be doing IT for a company called Rocky Mountain Herbaceuticals. What exactly do they do? They grow and own a recreational marijuana dispensary. You gotta be shitting me. Oh my God. That's awesome. They've had 400% growth since they started, and they're looking to expand. If you're interested, they're looking for a chief of security, Pat. I could put in a good word for you. I'm pretty comfortable where I'm at, Dean, I chuckled. But in all seriousness, I truly hope this new start works out well for you and your family. You all deserve it in the best way possible. Thanks, Pat. That means a lot. I'll never forget what you did for me. I just did my job, Dean. You and I know it was much more than that. Take care, Pat. Come see us out there sometime when we get settled in a permanent place. I'll do that, Dean. We shook hands, held it, and then brought it in for a fond embrace. Dean was more than just a coworker. He was a friend, and I was going to miss my friend. My relationship with Clarissa, which seemed to have been thawing and working its way towards something resembling a friendship, definitely entered a new ice age again after I found about her and Brad Weston. I did my very best not to bring it up and start an all-out war again, but I didn't exactly hide the fact that my platonic feelings towards her had cooled mightily. It all came to a head one afternoon that summer when I picked up Nick and Jake from Clarissa's place after the boys had spent a week with Clarissa, Caroline, and Martin at their lake house near Osakis, Minnesota. My interactions with her had become increasingly short and curt. I said nothing offensive but was not overtly friendly either. "Boys, can you do me a favor and wait in your dad's truck while he and I talk for a few moments?" Nick and Jake exchanged a "here we go again" look and did as they were asked. "Patrick, is there something bothering you? You seem awfully short and curt with me the last few weeks." I thought we were heading in a more positive direction, but I can't help but feel like things are taking a step back lately. Things are fine. I am fine. The boys are fine. We're all fine. Everybody's fine. Patrick, what's gotten into you? Why are you so short and snippy with me? What makes you think I'm short and snippy? Well, for starters, how about the fact that you answer my questions with a snarky question? I said nothing in return. Come on, Patrick. We have to co-parent our kids, okay? It is important for them that you and I make an attempt to get along. I'm making the attempt. Why can't you? I looked away, shaking my head. I really don't think you want to get into this, Clarissa. I think it's important that we just let things be as they are. Let's face it, this is the dynamic we have. Nothing is going to change that. Patrick, for God's sake, the last few months have been great. We've been talking and communicating more than we did in the last months of our marriage. I thought we were becoming friends again. I thought so too, Clarissa. And then, every once in a while, some new tidbit of information about you rears its ugly head and I end up going back to that place where I was the clueless, cucked husband who was too much of an idiot to realize that his loving wife was cheating on him with multiple men. Oh, my God, Patrick, what the hell is bringing this all on? I've already apologized to you for Bud and Marion. Why can't you work past that? I have. I worked past Bud Roberts and Marion Lawson. What I haven't worked past yet is Brad Weston. Clarissa gasped and tears of shame immediately started streaking down her face. Oh, Patrick, what did you hear? I heard that you were not only cheating on me with Bud Roberts and Marion Lawson, but that you were cheating on Bud Roberts with Brad Weston. Does that sound about right? Who did you hear that from, Patrick? What does it matter now? It's just one more piece in the puzzle. I just wonder how many more revelations are going to come my way. How many more men did you screw while we were married that I don't know about? How many more a-holes out there are laughing at me behind my back? Clarissa was sobbing now. Please, Patrick, let me explain. I beg you. What is there to explain? That there is a very real possibility that I could be hit every once in a while with news that there is yet another guy out there that my wife screwed while we were married? Huh. How the hell do you think that makes me feel? How do you think that would make our kids feel if they had to hear about it? Oh God, Patrick, I am so sorry. Well, I'm sorry too, Clarissa, but sorry just doesn't cut it anymore. My God, it is amazing that I can stare at your face and have absolutely no recollection of you being the same woman I married all those years ago. Patrick, I am so sorry. Please let me try and explain, she begged, sobbing. I got right up in her face. You want to explain? Go ahead. Explain. What? What's your excuse? What possible good reason is there for cheating on the father of your children? Clarissa said nothing, just sobbed. Nothing? You got nothing to say? Yeah, that's what I figured. I turned and headed back towards my truck and the boys. I resented you. I stopped and turned around. I resented you, Patrick. I walked back towards her. Resented me? For what? For being you, Patrick, she sobbed. I resented you for being you. We lived in a small starter home in Red River Falls when you were on the police department. I had to prod you into moving to the country, but you couldn't unless you got hired by the sheriff's department. You weren't really going for it. You were comfortable on the police department and could have been happy there and in that little house forever. I wanted so much for us, Patrick, but I never felt like you wanted it as much as I did. That's how I got involved with Bud, so you could finally get on the sheriff's department and we could move to our acreage. And then I just got enamored with Bud Roberts and how much drive and ambition he had and wished that I could see that in you, too. I just always wished that you could be more than you were, Patrick. Why wasn't I good enough for you the way I was? I don't know. Because you just weren't, Patrick. Bud introduced me to Marion and other important people around the community. I knew you were never going to actively pursue being anything more than just a patrol deputy. You were happy just doing your job, and that was it. I just wanted you to be so much more, Patrick. I felt important when I was with Bud Roberts and even Marion. I felt like I had power, drive, and ambition because they liked me. Then what the hell was Brad Weston? Brad Weston was just sex. I knew I could get any man I wanted, and a lot of the women at the gym had been with Brad and talked about how good he was and how big his tool was and other stupid stuff that bitchy women talk about. I went after Brad just because I could. It was for sport. Bud Roberts was the real man in my life at that time. And it was because of what I told you before. He was a somebody. You were still a nobody, Patrick. My heart was breaking. I stood there for a moment before answering. All I ever wanted for us, Clarissa, was for me to be a good husband and good father, two things I never had in my life. My own father was so obsessed with running his law firm that he never had time for me, my sister, or my mom. He was barely there for her when she was dying of cancer. All I ever wanted, Clarissa, was the family I never had growing up. I'm sorry, Patrick. I couldn't help the way I feel. I just feel like you could have been so much more. Your father is an incredibly successful attorney. Your sister's husband is a successful attorney. You could have been anything you wanted, Patrick. You settled for being just a cop, and I started to hate you for that. I stood there for a few moments, just absorbing her words. Clarissa had stopped crying and actually seemed to have gained some resolve and confidence. Suddenly, she returned to being the Clarissa I knew at the end of our marriage again. And then I started to chuckle, and that was followed by laughter. Pretty soon, I was laughing so hard my sides hurt. What the hell is so funny, Patrick? You, I said, trying to regain my composure. You are what is so funny. Don't you get it? The whole screwed up situation is so ironic it's hilarious. I was content being the man I wanted to be, a good husband, father, and provider. That wasn't good enough for you. So you cheated on me with the type of men you wanted in your life. And because you turned yourself into a shameless 304 for these men, it ultimately ended up turning me into the man you always wanted me to be. And now I'm finally the man you always wanted, and I have absolutely zero desire to be a part of your life. Ironic, huh? I burst out laughing again as Clarissa burst into tears again from a new wave of shame. Please, Patrick, you have to believe that I'm not that same person anymore. That's who I was then, not who I am now. Oh, bullshit, Clarissa. For a moment there during your explanation, I caught a very good glimpse of Clarissa the bitch. She's still there somewhere inside, whether you believe it or not. And besides, why should you care now, anyway? You've got Tom Wellington in your life to fill the role of the ambitious, successful male role model. I broke up with Tom weeks ago, Patrick. I haven't seen him since the festival. It's you I think of now. I still love you and only you. Believe me, Patrick, if I could go back in time and change things to where we lived in our little 2-bedroom ranch house and you back on the police force, I would do it in a heartbeat not to have to go through all of this again, she sobbed. But we can't, Clarissa. We can't. If there's one thing I learned from you, it is that I'm no longer going to focus on the past. Our life when we lived in that little ranch house together is in the past, and you chose to ignore it. Our time together before I became sheriff is in the past, and I'm going to choose to ignore that. My life has one direction now, Clarissa, and that is forward. And I'm choosing to take the boys, Shannon and Bridget, with me. I turned and left once and for all and climbed back in my truck, casting one final glance at Clarissa as she stood there sobbing and trying to console herself. Why is Mom crying? My youngest, Jake, wanted to know. Because she misses someone, I answered. Who does she miss? Nick asked. Someone who doesn't exist anymore. What happened to him? Did he die? Jake asked. No, he didn't die, boys. In a very real way, you could probably say he was reborn. I put the big Ford in gear and headed back to my home in the country, forward to my new life with my boys, my soon-to-be daughter Bridget and my beautiful fiancée Shannon, who would become my loving wife in just a few short weeks. I caught one last glance at Clarissa in my rearview mirror and was struck by how profoundly appropriate that image was. She was right where she belonged. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.